This is a reading from the 6th chapter of Luke. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. There is that of God in everyone. Quakers don't have a creed, but if we had a creed, the idea that there is that of God in everyone is one that most of us would expect to find included in some part of a Quaker creed. So I wish that we weren't so fuzzy about what that means. We're all prone to misunderstanding it some of the time, and some of us misunderstand it most of the time. We very easily start to believe and to act as though that of God in everyone refers to something human, something like a conscience or the power of reason, or an inborn desire to be good. We forget that we are not speaking about the character of human beings, but that we are speaking about God's relationship with women and men. When we talk about that of God in everyone, we are speaking about something of God, about some spark or presence of God within each one of us, which leads and teaches us about a very real Christ come to teach his people himself from the inside, about an inner light which does not have its origins in our human lives, but originates in the life of God. And I always insist on this distinction between that of God within us and our human nature, because I am too aware of the ways in which human beings can be a horror to one another. Intentionally and unintentionally, we inflict a great deal of suffering upon each other. If I believe that when I speak about that of God, I'm talking about some aspect of human goodness, then sooner or later I'm going to come across a human being in whom I can see absolutely nothing of God whatsoever. There will be no goodness that I can notice. Only by believing that the presence of God lives within each one of us, no matter how invisible, will I be able to muster any love at all for my enemy or for the person in whom I see no good. When we understand that of God within everyone as being something of God and not something human, this has consequences beyond the problem of loving our enemies. It has consequences for the way we love our friends, and for those who are neither our enemies nor our friends. In reality, most of the people that we live amongst don't rise to the level of either friend or enemy. They're irritants, or people whom we envy, or folks standing in the way, or people who represent to us something that we don't like. They are co-workers whose political beliefs we don't share, or the mechanic who always knows what's wrong with our car and fixes it, and it's never what we thought it might be. They are the woman ahead of us in the express lane at the grocery store who is pushing a cart with 41 items, not 12 or less. They are people who just bother us. And mostly they are people whom we do not see. In one of J.D. Salinger's story about the Glass family, Salinger has his narrator, Buddy, retell a Taoist story that he once heard. I don't know whether this is an actual Taoist story or a pretend Taoist story, But either way, it's a magnificent story. I want to attempt to tell it to you. So once upon a time, there was a man, Po Lo, whose occupation was to choose horses for Duke Mu, the Duke of Chang. He did this for many years and chose many excellent horses for the Duke until he was an old man. Eventually, the Duke called for Po Lo and said to him, "You are now quite old. The travel you undertake in choosing my horses must be hard on you. Is there someone else in your family who could take over this work?" Po Lo considered for a while, and then he replied, "A good horse can be picked out by its general build and appearance. But the great horse, the superlative horse, the horse that raises no dust and leaves no tracks, that horse is something evanescent and fleeting, elusive as thin air. It cannot be easily seen. My children cannot do that. They can tell a good horse when they see one, but they can't tell a superlative horse. I do have a friend, though, Cal, who sells firewood and vegetables, and he was as good at picking horses as I am. Go and see him." So the Duke went to see Cal, and the Duke sent Cal to find a horse. 3 months later, he returned. He said he'd found the horse. "They're keeping it for you in a stable in Shashi," he said to the Duke. "What kind of horse is it?" the Duke asked. "It's a stallion, a coal-black stallion," Cal said. But when the Duke sent servants to bring the horse, it turned out to be a dun-colored mare. The servant sent a message to the Duke, and the Duke was angry. He went to see Po Lo. "That friend of yours, Cal, whom I sent to look for a horse, has made a big mess of it. He can't even tell a horse's color or sex. He said that he had found me, a coal-black stallion, but he had chosen a dun-colored mare. What on earth does he know about horses?" Po Lo was not upset or puzzled when he heard this. He was pleased. "Has he really got that far?" Po Lo said. "Then he is worth 10,000 of me put together. He is far better than I am. What Cal looks at is the spiritual part of the horse. In making sure of what's really important, he forgets the details. He doesn't see whether it's white or gray, male or female. As he concentrates on the qualities of the heart, he loses sight of the external physical qualities. He sees what he needs to see and not what he does not need to see. He looks at the things he ought to look at and not at what he shouldn't look at. For that reason, Cal is such a good judge of horses that he could judge something better than horses." When the mare arrived, she turned out to be, in fact, a superlative horse who raised no dust and left no tracks. I love this story. At different times, I have loved it for different reasons. The reason I love it these days is because it reminds me how differently God sees us than we see ourselves or than we see each other. When we walk into our office or classroom, the grocery store, or our living room, we look around and see people who are male or female, tall or short, athletic or clumsy. Among strangers and acquaintances, friends and family, we see traits of character and mood. We see people who are abrasive or insecure or arrogant or falsely humble, rude, grouchy, or we see people who are compassionate, talented, truth tellers, and promise keepers. We see these things and we are misled by everything we see. We use these characteristics to assign value to people. We use them to measure other people and ourselves and to calculate each person's worth. But what we hear from the Hebrew prophets and in the teachings of Jesus, what we learn from the mystics and from the words of God spoken within our hearts, is that there is only one true measure of any person's value, which is each person's value as a child of God. A measure which makes every one of us exactly equal in value. By that measure, it makes no difference whether someone is abrasive or conciliatory, skilled or unskilled, employed as a fast food worker or a brain surgeon, whether they're angry or sad or happy, whether they treat us well or poorly. When we look only for that of God in the other, we find a human being no more and no less beloved of God than we are ourselves. Because of and despite everything we see in another person's character and personality, we ourselves carry exactly the same measure of God's love. When we look at that of God in each other, we are not swayed one way or the other by our prejudices about human value, but we are led by and respond to our sense of each other as children of God. As much as I might like to, I cannot speak for God, but I imagine that the fact that we are all equal in God's love does not mean that God views us as indistinguishable from one another. We are still individuals with our peculiar gifts and our idiosyncratic sins, our own place in the world, and both a false and a true identity. God sees the falseness in us, in every one of us, and never ceases to work for our transformation into something truer. That work for transformation, for our transformation, always accompanies the presence of God within us. But when even God, who loves us, sees the falseness in us, it stands to reason that we, who often do not love each other, will focus on the falseness as well. Only it doesn't immediately look like falseness to us. It looks like something that we don't like very much. It looks like aggressiveness, or power seeking, or gossiping, or anger, or just plain old meanness, self-regard. Or it might look like something we like too much, charisma, or effectiveness, or the ability to be analytical. The difference between the way we look at each other and the way God looks at us, I think, is that when we view each other as falseness, that is, when we encounter the means by which men and women protect themselves from the world, and the means by which they perform for the world, and even try to control the world, when we view each other as falseness, we mistake it for identity. We see the way someone is good at one thing and poor at another and think we know who they are. God doesn't make that mistake. God, like a good judge of horses, sees through what we look like and what we do and sees who we are meant to be. Could we ourselves ever get to that place, the place where it's no longer hard to love our enemies or even only the people who irritate us because we see through the falseness to who they really are, that is, to their status as children of God? I have to say that honestly, I don't think we can. I think this is one of those places where God's knowledge and understanding are so far beyond ours that we can never obtain even a part of it. But I do think we have some hope of acting in alignment with God's knowledge when we keep reminding ourselves over and over that our true value is in being children of God. My true value and your true value, the true value of the person who contradicts every word I say, and the true value of the person who has all the talent and all the skills that I wish I had. There is that of God in everyone, and that is all of our true value.